right, welcome back. You're still watching Morning Live on SABC2 and SABC News Channel 404. Now, the top leadership of the Correctional Services Department visited St Albans Prison in Port Elizabeth yesterday. That is after Monday's brawl between warders and inmates, which led to the death of 3 people. Prisoners are said to have attacked warders. This led to violence in which 21 inmates and 5 officials were wounded. The Deputy Minister of the Department of Correctional Services and the National Commissioner visited the facility yesterday, and now we joined this morning by Ntlakana Gcinumzi. He is the Acting Chief Deputy Commissioner from the Department of Correctional Services responsible for incarceration. Dr. Ntlakana, good morning to you and welcome to Morning Live.
A very good morning to you too, ma'am.
Thank you so much for coming through now. After the incident on Monday, the details were very sketchy as to what might have happened. But you visited the prison yesterday. What did you find?
Actually, I have not visited the facility yet. The primary visit was by the Deputy Minister and the National Commissioner. What we do know for certain is that the attack on officials happened just as breakfast was being served. And it seems, at least based on the information we have at our disposal, that it was a premeditated attack by inmates on officials, and that in the retaliation that followed that, we then had the unfortunate eventuality of passing away of some of the officials.
It was a premeditated incident, but what also came across is that the inmates were not searched when they made their way to the dining hall. And those inmates, apparently, they are regarded as the worst of the worst.
Indeed. I mean, some of the considerations that will factor into the investigation that will be launched is the compliance to basic security protocols, which would require that inmates who are about to move into a public area should be searched. It is a known fact in correctional facilities, not just in South Africa, but internationally, that your communal areas, like your breakfast areas, your recreational areas, are the most susceptible to violence by inmates. So the officials on duty should have taken reasonable measures to ensure that at least there was a random search of offenders as they were being removed from their cells into the breakfast area.
And I would want to believe that the main question here is to how those sharp objects made it to that common area, like you're saying.
Well, it would not be your conventional knives, we presume. The shanks that are used by inmates in many instances are formed out of everyday things. Toothbrushes, for example. You can use broken glasses from windows. We have had incidents where inmates would break toilet pots in order to form some shanks out of those sharpened objects.
All right. And the reports were also saying that apparently these inmates had previously raised concerns about the certain privilege that were withheld from them. Could that be, the main cause of what happened?
Look, I would not want to speculate into the causes of the violence, because that would be something that would be determined by the investigation.
But
we do know, complaints and requests are normal issues that arise on a daily basis. Actually, the normal routine is that when cells are opened in the morning, one of the things that gets done is complaints and requests are taken. Now, we would be depending on, for example, independent judicial inspectorate on determining whether or not there were long outstanding complaints that were not resolved by regarding offenders. And we know that one of the most common complaints offenders have is that of being transferred from one facility to another, which is unfortunately not always possible because of the state of overcrowding of our facilities. So indeed, it may be that that was the root cause, but it has never been a justification in these instances for violence to be used. Inmates have various methods of raising complaints and dissatisfaction, and it is most probable, as we have said, that this would be gang-related more than just ordinarily complaints and requests that have not been honored.
Yeah, I wanted to come to that issue of gangsterism, because we've also heard from the National Commission yesterday that gangsterism is very rife at that prison.
Let's first note that it is at the Maximum Correctional Center where this incident happened. And indeed, we have had previous incidents for years, actually, where we have had to grapple with the challenge of gangsterism in St Albans. And we will be looking at that dynamic because it is a reality of that center. That
but you're saying that you've experienced that previously, but you'll only be looking into it now. Is it not something that should have been addressed maybe?
The threat and risk of gangs is always evolving. You will have instances, for example, where it is activities that are provoked by incidents arising from other facilities. For example, as a result of this incident in St Albans, we have had to place other correctional centers on alert because there might be instigation by gangs in other facilities to stage other acts in those facilities, even though those facilities may not have inherently issues relating to security. So we do acknowledge that there are gangs. We will not simply say that the incident itself was as a result of gangs and that it arose from incidents or activities that happened at that center. But it is a factor that we must consider in the investigation.
All right. And during the media briefing yesterday, the National Commissioner talked about the prison being understaffed. Apparently, some wardens had gone on leave, and because it was a long weekend, some had taken days off. The issue of understaffing and overcrowding, because the reports are also saying that the prison should house about 4,000 inmates, and it's sitting at 4,387 as it is now.
Indeed. The challenge of understaffing and overcrowding is also incidental to the fact that we have had to adopt a particular shift pattern, which unfortunately is a result of various court actions that have been brought against the department by unions. So the shift pattern that we are using currently is not the ideal one. The National Commissioner has said it. The Minister has also been briefed on it. We should actually be moving to a better shift pattern and an increase of staff. The shortage of staff that was experienced in St Albans is unfortunately not unique to St Albans. It is the norm in many of our facilities.
But could it have contributed to this incident at St Albans?
Of course, there are many possibilities, including the fact that the system of correctional services is dependent on routine. Now, it is inherently that routine that becomes your biggest risk. Inmates know at what time you will open. They know how many officials will be situated where, because it is inherent in the system that should happen. Right. So it is an inevitable part of the threat dynamic that inmates who are bent on attacking officials will take advantage of the staffing component. They know when our staffing is low, and this would have been one of those days when staffing is low.
All right, Gcinumzi, we're going to leave it here, but I don't know if you're able to respond on the allegations and the video clip that was leaked on our social media page from the Correctional Service in Kimberley. Are you able to respond to that?
I have unfortunately not seen the clip.
You haven't seen it?
Yes.
All right. No, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And of course, compliments. You have yourself a beautiful new year for
Thank
2017.
You. Thank you.
Well, that's Ntlakana Gcinumzi. He's the Acting Chief Deputy Commissioner responsible for incarceration and correctional from the Department of Correctional Services, talking to us about the incident that unfolded at St Albans Prison in Port Elizabeth on Monday. We take